would buy Mexican candy and take it over to the U.S. and then sell them to my schoolmates. So that was my first taste of entrepreneurship until the principal shut it down because no
You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. Downloadable audio episodes can be found in the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie, Calls on Call Extraordinary Answering Service, as well as the Bold Business Book. And today we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Lewis of Nir-Yu. And Lewis, we're talking staffing today. So let's just start with there. What is Nir-Yu?
Thank you, James. First of all, allow me to thank you for having me on. It's a privilege and an honor.
Yeah, happy to have you.
Thanks. Very excited to talk to small and mid-market companies about staffing. Because what we do is basically hire staff to work remotely for U.S. companies from Latin America, and in doing so, saving them 60 to 70%.
Oh, that's healthy. Over just having a domestic hourly employee.
Correct. So I think what's interesting, James, if I could, is twofold, because one, the ability to find talent is important. Because as I'm sure you and a lot of your listeners are aware, the talent wars are so hot in the U.S. There are so few jobs that even finding the talent becomes difficult. So, and if you can find them and then employ them to work in the same time zone, Latin America, right? Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, they're all in similar time zones. If you can find them in Latin America to work remotely for you and save 60 or 70%, you sort of just kill that two-headed hydra that tends to do away with a lot of businesses that want to grow and need to hire.
Nice. So how did you get involved in the staffing business?
Great question. So I've been an entrepreneur my entire life. I won't bore you with all the details. I'll just tell you the funny story about my entrepreneurial beginnings, and then I'll jump to your answer. I was born in Mexico. My parents moved to Southern California in 1976 when I was about 7 years old, and then we would oftentimes cross the border into Tijuana and do some things. My mom would go grocery shopping for some things that back in the 70s you couldn't find in the U.S. So I would buy Mexican candy and take it over to the U.S. and then sell them to my schoolmates. So that was my first taste of entrepreneurship until the principal shut it down because no one had lunch money. They would be spending it all on Mexican candy. Move forward into the early 2000s, and I founded what became Mexico's first tech startup to raise U.S. venture capital funding. So, in Mexico City, me and my brother started a tech company, and through sheer hard work and some luck, we were able to create a product that had good, strong customers in Latin America, and then we're connected to some VC funds, Intel Capital, Darby Technology Ventures, and then they funded us, moved to the U.S., and I ran the company until its eventual acquisition. So it was there that I got into the staffing business, but it was our staffing, right? When I moved to the U.S., I sort of had this aha moment where some of the realizations that I just mentioned to you, it was the first time that I had them. Gee, there is, the talent is sparse in the U.S. and well, that sounded worse than I wanted. There is little available talent. Talent is everywhere, but availability talent is very little, especially for smaller companies or startups. So, and then the second is when I saw the price tag or the costs involved, I had sticker shock. So what I did is went back to Mexico and used our contacts and then started hiring in the region to do work remotely for us. So that was how we got started. And just to sort of finish on that chapter, and it'll be the full answer to you is 2013, 2014, my company was acquired. On my way to retirement, I started getting calls from other CEOs from the Washington D.C. region, which is where I lived, and they had remote talent projects that were going sideways, and they asked if I could help them fix the projects and or find other talent that could help them. I did the first few of them sort of as favors, free, and then realized after a while that the problem was real, right? So managing remote talent, finding remote talent, even though it sounds plain vanilla and easier to do, it's a challenge. You got to vet them. You got to make sure that that culturally. I mean, I'll get to that later. So after a few of these, I started doing this full time, and that's my company today, James.
Nice. We hit a lot of points there. I want to touch on a few. When the tech company, are we talking software or what kind of
Of
company was
course,
this?
yes. It was a software company. It was called Jack B, like Jack B Nimble, Jack B Quick.
All right.
Um, it started in the 2000s, and we were one of the first companies in the Web 2.0 space. And then, like other companies, uh, as you meet your real clients, you sort of pivot or sort of move. And then when we were acquired, we were in the real time business intelligence space. So
All right.
very exciting times, yeah.
What was Jack B? Like, what was the platform for?
Uh, uh, I'm sorry. What you're asking? What was Jackby in its
Yeah, as far as
in
the
its
software,
inception?
why would people use it? I
What
have to
would people use
apologize.
it?
I'm not
Well,
familiar with it. So,
the answer is, and this is a thesis that repeats over and over. What ends up happening is people, um, as technology becomes easier to use, people tend to put data into more and more sources. You have data in Excel, you have data in databases, other, you have access to other people's data through APIs, through web calls. You have just a bunch of different data, and the ability to bring in these different sources of data and mash it up, as it was called in the 2010s. You would get a piece of data from this source and a piece of data from this source, create some sort of correlation, and then that data be able to bring in another piece of data. So doing that when it's coming from multiple sources is difficult. It usually takes a lot of integration work. So we made it easier through a canonical model that you'd be able to point to these sources, find the data, bring the data, and by having a common structure, common language, be able to mash it up. And then after you mashed it up, sort of put it into user interfaces that were easy to use. So that's why it was called the real time business intelligence space. I hope that made sense.
yeah, absolutely. So, is that still working? It's out there.
So
Whoever bought it is
after it
still
was
going.
acquired, it sort of went into a different name, and I believe the vestiges of it are still alive.
All right.
How much of it? Uh, I guess I'd have to take a look at the code to be able to fully fully respond. But yeah, it's still there, and people are still working on it.
All right. Interesting. I mean, from a staffing standpoint, when you were building that company, you were looking for programmers, then I imagine, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, when we talk staffing, it's amazing, James, because the ability to find people to do work remotely, has taken on a whole new uh, galaxy. Forget category, right? Because of COVID and because of Zoom and because of remote, Slack, other types of remote tools, there are far more jobs or positions that can be done remotely. So back in the day, we were looking for developers. Today, uh, 60% of our work is still developer centric, IT centric, all sorts of developers, Java, .NET, DBAs, front end, back end, full stack, you name it, we can find it. Data scientists, right? I mean, everyone is now looking for data scientists or people to work with large language models. You can find all those in Latin America. I mean, let's not forget it's a region with close to with over 500 million people living in it. So we can find anything. But back to your point. So IT was the crux of our staffing when we had the technology company. To date, still 60% of our business. Then the other 40% is, believe it or not, we hire people to work in law firms, paralegals, account managers, assistant account managers. Um, there are oodles of well-trained people that speak very good English and are willing to work remotely. And because of that, so law firms, accounting firms, US GAAP trained bookkeepers, accountants, tax preparers, we find all those. Customer support representatives, business development managers, um, digital marketers, video editors. So it's a plethora of jobs. I'd almost say there are very few jobs that we're not able to fulfill from Latin America. As long as they can be done remotely, I'd almost tell you that we have a 95% success rate in filling those jobs.
That's incredible. Tell me one. I guess we touched on a few things as far as the verticals that they're in, but also the uniform is that they're all working from home. And our business, the call answering service that I have, was in an office. Pandemic happens, and they're like, "Hey, you can't be in an office anymore. You got to work remote." So we spread everybody out, or I guess locally spread them out. And as we grew, because pandemic actually was good to be in the call answering world, we couldn't hire where we were. It was just, I mean, the pool, it was terrible. It was crazy. They're paying $20 an hour at the gas station for first shift. And then bonuses on top of that to go into, it was crazy. Anyways, so we started hiring people all over the country, domestically. And then we learned people that work from home, some get it and some do it and some have good work ethic, but that is not universal. So how do you figure out the people that can work from home and do work from home versus just the people that say, I can totally work from home, and they're trying to work from home at 7 jobs at the same time?
The question you ask is incredibly important. And first, let me state, most of our people work from home, but we also have some companies that we work with. We like to call them partners, but I'll refer to them as clients, so as not to confuse everyone. So our clients, we have some that want office space, and we rent office space for them where they people can go work. So, sometimes they're spread out all over the region or all over the country, and then office space becomes a little more difficult. Sometimes the request is for us to find people, whether in Bogota, Colombia, or in Mexico City, or in Guadalajara, wherever. We find all of them in one place, and then part of the recruitment process is letting them know that they will be going to an office instead of working from home. So it depends on the use case. Law firms, some of them tend to be very office centric because whether personal injury or other types of law, they want to make sure that all the documents in there, that there's security and cameras. We work with some HIPAA related companies that again need to be in office. But I'm prolonging the answer. The second part, James, is so what we found is that 73% of most remote hiring projects are failure. And some of them tend to happen because of the hiring and some of these cultural nuances that you were mentioning. So what we've done is we created a framework called the Remote Intelligence Framework, and remote is an acronym. It stands for rigorous talent selection, expert onboarding and integration, managed support and services, optimized team performance, transparent cost plus pricing, and enhanced scalability and growth. So the R, again, rigorous talent selection. So we don't have a bench of people that say they're going to work from home. Instead, we will take each and every job description, because everyone's unique. Everyone needs different skill sets, different personalities, different time zones, different everything. We will take that job description, go out to the market, find the people that best fulfill that job description, and then we'll take them through a pretty rigorous vetting process where we interview them in their place where they're going to be working? Does it have the acoustics, right? Or are they working from their home with their kids coming in and out? We will make sure that their language skills are correct. If it's going to be a client facing role, it's different than a chat facing role, right? It's different than someone who is going to be working internally. The accent levels are different. The language usage skills are different. So the answer is it depends, and whatever it depends on, we do a very rigorous process to make sure that they comply with everything that is there. And then the second part, to make sure they're not working for 6 or 7 companies, as you said, it's not like we just staff them out and then stop being involved. We are deeply involved on a month to month, day to day basis in order to make sure that if someone doesn't show up, what happened, right? So we are the HR department of their offshore team to make sure that quality is there, that the presence is there, that they're showing up, that everything is happening, and in doing so, provide the right level of support and service both for you, but for the resource. Because the resource also has issues, right? Why haven't I been paid? Has the money come in? Why am I being paid a different amount? So we are the intermediary that takes care of our clients' needs as well as the resources needs, and in doing so, make sure that it's a win-win-win relationship.
Gotcha. The majority of your clients, they're hiring, they come to you and they say, hey, I need 5 or 50 employees or something of that nature? Are they coming to you with a project and you figure out how many employees it's going to take to get that project done?
So the answer is no. Typically, it's exactly the opposite. Typically, it's companies that so rather than hiring for projects, what we call a project is more a gig. Okay, so companies will come to us knowing what they need to hire, understanding that the project or that the job can be done remotely, and then we will look for those people remotely. We do have other instances where they come to us and say, here's what I want to do, and then we find an expert to help us sort of dimension the magnitude, the different talent that has to be hired, and then someone to manage the project. But for us, it's less a project than hiring people to work remotely. And just to correct one thing, it doesn't have to be 5, 15 people. We work with companies and they start off with one person, right?
Oh, all right.
Sometimes it's a caller, a person, a go-to-market engineer, a developer, and then hopefully, if we do a good job and our client does a good job, then it'll grow naturally over time. But we feel comfortable starting off with one. We now have clients that have upwards of 50 resources with us, but most of them start small and then grow.
All right. Tell me a story. I'm going to tell you a little bit of backstory with an experience that I had using non-domestic, so non-US based employees. We, for a hot minute during the pandemic when we were struggling finding people, so we hired a company that I think they were just a middleman for people out of the Philippines, maybe. And it's funny because the managers that I would speak to, I'd have these meetings, and there would be 5 people besides me in these Zoom meetings. And I was thinking, what are all these people doing in this meeting? Anyways, most of them, or at least the 2 that did most of the talking, seemed like very intelligent people. They spoke English very well, probably better than me, and they were incredible. And I'm like, I need you. And they're like, no, not us. We got these other people. And the employees that they had it was a train wreck. And so, it turns out, this is during pandemic times, I guess they would have problems with people ghosting and just not doing the job like they expected to or that we were sold. So we were having to dink around with that. And it was interesting because in my head, when I first signed up with them, I was like, this is going to solve all of my employee problems. Because at the time, we had a ton of employee problems. We had work from home people, like I said, that whole holding multiple jobs at the same time. We ran into that. People having kids, pets, all that kind of stuff running around. We've had that. Just I'm sure that you've had it on a multiplier way more than me, but the employees that we've gone through during that pandemic time with the work from home thing, that was an abused system. I can even tell you there's one time we had the software, it was remote monitoring Big Brother software. I hated having it, but when people start having multiple jobs at the same time they have your job, you're like, we got to have this. Anyways, I typed that into Google because I had a question about it. And the first, I don't know, 10, 15 things that came up were how to trick that software into showing that you're actually at the office. And so, from my point of view, I was like, oh no, for there to be websites and Reddits that are devoted to how to screw over your employer, what kind of world are we in where people can't just do the job, get paid, and move on with your life? Anyways, I say all that to say, tell me a story about the successes or challenges that you run into working with clients, working with you guys with the remote employees.
Yeah, no, look, the horror stories that we've seen and heard are some of them are so bad that I wouldn't even dare tell you about it. Things involving cameras and people showing off body parts and whatnot. So it can get messy. But I'll sort of summarize it this way. So, as I mentioned, we've done hundreds of these, James, right? Hundreds of engagements. And over the years, what like any company, you wanna learn, you wanna improve, right? We're all any successful company, yours, mine, all of us are in a continuous improvement process, or at least we should be. So as part of the continuous improvement, years ago, we started documenting, right? So what happened in this case? What happened in this case? What happened in this case? And long story short is over 10 years, we've identified what we call the offshore team death trap, right? And the offshore team death trap are 7 components, right, or systemic failures that you're able to point to and say, this is what happened and this is why, the project failed. Which again is the fact that these 7 exist and that they can be stacked on top of each other is why 73% of all of these projects or gigs fail, right? Similar to what you were describing. So what we've done is by analyzing the components, then we've been able to, in our process, both hiring as well as supporting and servicing, we've been able to sort of counteract these. So let me give you a couple of them, and then we'll sort of talk about how these impacted the story that you just told us, right? Or the analogy that you told us. So the first one is what we call the talent mirage. So the talent mirage is when someone is offering you skills that look solid on paper, sorry, but crumble under real world, pressure. So we had to come up with a way to sort of circumvent these things and make sure that these things would happen, right? Which we just touched on the previous section. So rigorous talent selection counteracts talent mirage. The next one is cultural chasm. So it's whenever there are integration failures because of the complexity of a translation. And I don't mean translation from a language, I mean translation from a cultural perspective, right? What's expected of people? So working from home, what exactly does that mean? Does that mean, again, on my bed with my kids and pets running around, or are you expected to have a separate room with good acoustics so that you can speak? So we translate culture. What are your needs and what are their requirements? And if they can't prove that they can fulfill those requirements, then they won't be hired. Uh, there's management quicksand, right? Whenever there are time sinks that turn you, who were supposed to hire people in order for them to take care of jobs that you need, and it turns you into a full-time babysitter instead of the strategic leader that you should be. So I mean, these are all logical, but it just so happens that and you hit the nail on the head when you said we were hiring domestically and these things didn't appear, and we tried to do this offshore, and all of a sudden these things started appearing. A lot of U.S. startup founders or mid-market companies think that having a 1099 that works out of Topeka, Kansas is going to be the same thing as having a consultant that works out of Tegucigalpa, Honduras. And the reason is it's not. There aren't only borders, there are culture, there are languages, there are things that are expected. And you need a translator like us, to be able to find the talent, make sure that the talent isn't BSing, make sure that the talent does what they say they do, and then make sure that on an ongoing basis the relationship is as it should be, and that's why we exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a business model, and we wouldn't make our money, James.
Fair, totally fair. Yeah, the company out of the Philippines, there's no way that I could have done what they were doing from a hiring and managing and all that jazz standpoint. Couldn't even touch it. I don't know that language. I have a hard time finding people domestically, just where do you put the ads kind of thing, and where are the people that you want actually looking for ads and all that jazz. So I don't even want to pretend to believe that I could do what they were doing. The
If,
challenge
if,
that,
if I
go ahead.
could, and I'm sorry to have interrupted you, but
Oh, you're
but I,
good.
I
You're good.
think I think there's one additional element that is incredibly important that I'd like to touch on, because you just said everything they do I couldn't do, and you're right, but ultimately there are two things that are important in these types of relationships, or two additional things. One is transparency. So for us, whenever we hire someone or we introduce someone, it's not like, James, here's Jose and he's going to be working for you. We based on your unique requirements, we'll find the right people that we think are right, and then we'll introduce not one, but several people, and then you get to interview them and you get to choose. Because this shouldn't be just me telling you who. A lot of companies do that because they have a bench of staff and they want to get people off the bench and billing. So we don't do that. We don't manage a bench. We prefer to do what's called passive recruiting, and based on your unique set of requirements, we will find people that fulfill those requirements and then hire them, if and when they're ready. So transparency about who, what are their skill sets is important. Transparency about wages. So whenever we introduce someone, it's not like, James, this is Jose, he's going to charge you X, and then that includes our margin. What we will do is we will tell you, James, this is Jose or this is Maria, and she expects to make this much and he expects to make this much, and we will give you for each person their wages, and you are absolutely free to talk to them about it, right? Because we when we introduce someone, you may find someone that is going to be paid a couple $100 more, but is two times better than the person that is going to be making X, and you rather pay $200 more to have this level of quality than $200 less to have this. And then, so the transparency about wages is important, and then we will be transparent and pre-negotiate a flat fee, not a percentage, mind you, but a flat fee that we get paid in order to found the person, support the person, help you on a month-to-month basis. So this transparency also is conducive to, as I've stated, a win-win-win relationship, where the type of situations that you presented that happened at this other company didn't happen to us. And because of all the transparency, if anywhere down the road you feel comfortable with the person, you want to keep the person, you want us to transfer the person, and the resource agrees and you agree, transparently we'll do it. It's not a problem. So you everything that you just said about you would know how, our job is to not only do it for you, but teach you how and make the process transparent, so that you're learning how, the resources learning how, and there's a level of comfort that allows you to work this way moving forward.
Gotcha. That's fair. Totally fair. Tell me about the language. So you're talking about a lot of different countries in Latin America, and I guess I've met people in my travels and stuff like that that I wouldn't even be able to begin to tell you where they're from. And others, their accent is so strong, it's like, oh yeah, you are from here. How do you find the people that fit, I guess, the accent or have the, I don't even want to say least accent or the minimal accent so that they can just do what they need to do when they're talking on the phone and stuff like that? I'm certain you have people that really phone or stuff like that, it doesn't really come into play. But in my world, phone is where it's at. How do you
Oh
figure that
yeah, yeah.
out?
I mean, it's incredibly important. In some cases, it's going to be internally, right? So developer to developer, and a certain level of accent is permitted. In others, client-facing roles like the ones that you're talking about, it's very very difficult to accept heavy accents. So to your question again, it's so Latin America is a region with 500 over 500 million. Um, Oddly enough, there are few countries that don't speak Spanish. So the largest country in Latin America is Brazil, and they speak Portuguese, and they have a unique accent. And then and then you have Belize, which is an English speaking country in Latin America, and then you have a couple of Dutch speaking ones, or at least one Dutch speaking one.
Huh.
Uh, yeah, Suriname is I believe Dutch speaking, but the rest are Spanish speakers. Uh, when we recruit, we do very in depth language skill testing. And well, first we will understand what kind of language skills you need, the client needs, and then based on that, we will find the people that comply with that. How? I mean, we have our ways of searching, sourcing, testing, doing all those things. But you'd be surprised how many people speak English and how many people speak very good English. In fact, you'd be surprised how many people speak native English. Let me give you an example. So, you know, and not to get political, but with what's going on in the U.S. and ICE and the deportations and whatnot, there are a lot of people, dreamers, they were called, or others that either have been asked nicely or not so nicely to leave the country, or there are other people that the level of discomfort has gotten such that they're leaving. And you have people that have grown up in the States or lived in the States for 10, 15, 20 years, and they can no longer live in the US because they didn't have immigration papers, whatever the reason. Again, I'm not here to get political, and whether correctly or incorrectly, that's for your listeners to decide on their own, and not for this conversation. But so all these people have varying levels of English dominance. I have a friend who recruits only dreamers. These are kids that grew up in the States, right? From the time they were 1, 2, 3 years old, grew up. So their elementary school was done in the US, their junior high was done in the States, sometimes through high school, and maybe even a smattering of college. And then they have to come back to Mexico. You would never know that they're not Americans, and yet you have these people making, $1,000 or $1,200 from Monterrey, Mexico, or Medellin, Colombia, because they were Colombian or they were Mexican, and they're now forced to live there, and this is the way they can make good money compared to what they would make locally, and yet a pittance compared to what local U.S. hires would make.
Yeah, that is genius. Because it's interesting because I think about this guy that for a hot minute, I had a different guy editing the video. Our videos here for the podcast. I'm trying to think where he was from. But I talked to him about, I said, just tell me about the hourly rate. What are people making? What is rent? All this kind of stuff. I want to say he was in Bangladesh or something like that. And he was giving me the rundown of what stuff costs and all that jazz. And what I was willing to pay, I just paid this guy because whatever. I just need the job done kind of thing. And I'm like, this guy's probably a 1%er in that country because comparatively, I'm paying him. Well, essentially, I was paying him what I'd pay somebody domestically here. But he's not domestic, but I didn't care. You get the job done. I don't care what. You don't even have to be on Earth, wherever you are.
Correct. So you just mentioned another of the components of the death trap, the hidden cost spiral, right? So because you go into a relationship with a person that works offshore, nearshore, thinking, gee, well, minimum wage in the U.S. is $15 an hour, so maybe if I pay this person $15, and then lo and behold, you're paying 3 times more than you should, and you have this person sort of now living, on easy street because he or she are being overpaid. So we tend to help and coach people how much they should be paying, uh, whatnot. But the other part of the answer is, uh, the good news is things are less expensive in Latin America, and because they're less expensive in Latin America, people can make less money and still make a fair, equitable wage. Let me give you one crazy example. So health insurance. You know what health insurance costs in the States. I mean,
It's insane. We don't even offer it. It's insane.
it's insane. Well, even if you don't offer it, people have to pay health insurance. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah. They have to have it. So
they have to
yeah,
have it,
there's
right? They
yeah.
have to have it. So, you know, you you're talking about a family of four paying in the thousands, right? And let me emphasize the S at the end, thousands of dollars per month. Um, and in most of Latin America, there is social health care. So most people, as long as they're working for a local company and they're paying, their taxes and social security and whatnot, they will get socialized medicine. So they'll be able to, get free health care, so to speak. And whether good care, it depends on the country, it depends on the city, depends on everything.
I
But
don't know. From my
again,
opinion, we don't have good care and it's overpriced. So
right. But if that person or that family wanted health insurance, so I would say for the equitable health insurance, private health insurance, not state run, but private health insurance, to cover a family of four, if it was a young family with young kids, instead of thousands of dollars, you're now talking hundreds of dollars. Hundreds. So a person that would have to make $4,000 or $5,000 just per month in the US just to make ends meet, to be able to pay rent or mortgage, health insurance, maybe a car and insurance, and then food. You know this. I mean, people in the US have to make $4, 5, 6, $7,000. In Latin America, that same family could be making 30% and live as comfortably as the company or the people in the US making 100%. So we're not taking advantage of people as much as what we're doing is there's an arbitrage opportunity, because the lower the cost, the lower the wage. The higher the cost, the higher the wage. And it just so happens that you in the US live in a high wage, high revenue need country. That's fine. But there are 500 and some million people who can get away with making 30% of what the US equivalent professionals would make and live as good a life down here, in Latin America than they would in the US. So it's a win-win if you're able to find the right talent, isn't it?
yeah, that's genius. Yeah, I can. The guy that I paid for the video editing thing, I knew that I overpaid, but I was expecting to get a level like this guy's gonna love it. He's gonna do the best work he could possibly do, and that didn't happen. So he's,
Because you
he's
didn't
not
use us,
he's
Dan.
not editing anymore for me. So, but you make me think like maybe I should just move to Latin America and I'll make the U.S. money but live down there.
How many US nationals do you think live in the region working remotely for US companies and living down here? Give me a number.
Percentage or
In
just
fact, I'll make it easier for you. Let's
yeah
talk about Mexico alone.
okay. I'm going to say 50,000 people.
How about a million?
A million.
1 million Americans. These aren't dreamers or the other people we spoke about. These are American expats that live in Latin America, working remotely for their US companies, making US wages, living the high life like you wouldn't believe here. Because if you make $100,000 in Mexico, you are part of that 0.01%. and and and
Wow.
and,
Okay.
and how many professionals don't can make $100,000 in the US. So yeah, it's you'd be surprised how many people actually do that, James.
Huh. That sounds pretty cool. It
Yeah,
sounds like they got it figured out. And I live in Wisconsin and we have winter. So I'm like, Mexico doesn't sound so bad.
yeah. Acapulco's not sounding so bad, is it? Or
No.
Cancun?
Tell me a story because I'll tell you another thing about my experience with traveling south. And for a hot minute, I shouldn't say hot minute, it was a couple of years, an employee in Puerto Rico, and the utilities like internet, electricity, she was always without power and very often without internet. And I mean, this is one person, so I don't know if she's like, oh yeah, I'm without power, or if it was legitimate. I'm without power. It just seemed, well, I assume it was real, or at least mostly real, because I have similar issues with people that live in Texas, where in other states, it's not as big of a deal unless there's something like Florida. I got people where when hurricanes come, I get it. Texas got their own power problems, but Puerto Rico seemed to have some challenges with both internet and power. And she even reached out to me and she's like, "Can I go work at a cafe?" And I'm like, "No, you can't work at a cafe." So tell me about that as far as infrastructure goes.
Yeah. So different countries, different cities, different regions can have all sorts of different issues. Um, there are places where the types of things that you mentioned can and do happen. Um, just as an example, Venezuela has a lack of electricity, right? If you were to look at Cuba, even though I don't think we've had a person working remotely from Cuba ever, but still, that
Sure.
there are different countries where you do have those issues. In different countries that the country doesn't have the issue, you can also have regions that do have an issue. If you ever traveled again in Mexico or in Colombia, if you traveled to the northern Mexico, it's very different than southern Mexico, and the level of infrastructure are incredibly different. So there could be a case where someone working out of Tijuana, which is the border with San Diego, is going to be very different than someone working out of Salina Cruz in Oaxaca, which is you know way down south. But let me generalize it. So in the big cities in most of Latin America, what you described doesn't happen. It happened 20, 30 years ago, yes. Today, having electric failures or internet failures or any of those are few and far between. I can't think of the last time that we had anything happen like this. And I travel throughout the region, at least nothing that I live firsthand, whether in cities in Mexico, Colombia, Costa Rica, Bolivia. No, Bolivia, that's not true. Chile, Argentina. So, I mean, could it happen? Yes. Is it often? No. Um, Again, can you sort of plan for it not to happen? Yes. If someone tells you that they're going to be working from their home and you ask them for their address because in order for us to send them the contract and everything, we need proof, ID, and then proof of domicile. And then we see that the proof of domicile is somewhere outside of a big city in a what's called a rancheria, which is a small town of a few hundred people way out in the boonies. That sets off alarms. And we say, you know what? As much as you want the job, we can't give it to you because that these issues will happen.
Gotcha. Okay. Tell me about equipment. Are you supplying computer and monitor and stuff like that, or is that something you're relying on them to have?
A little bit of both. It
Okay.
depends. It depends on the role. It depends on what type of equipment. It depends on the type of experience that the person wants. We have a lot of our clients that all they need is a laptop, and because it's the laptop, most people have laptops. Right? So if you're going to be hiring developers, most developers are sort of used to working on their laptops. Having said that, we also need to understand intellectual property rules because if you're a software company and you're going to hire people to create software and code and intellectual property, you don't want them working off their own laptops. You want them working off yours so that you can enforce intellectual property because again intellectual property is about not only assigning it but making sure that the equipment was provided by you and whatnot. So it depends again, and I think I've answered this several times now, James, but it depends on what our client wants, what our client needs, what the strategy is, and because of that they need someone like us to sort of coach them, make sure that their exact requirements are going to be met and then help them be fulfilled. If the person needs equipment, we can provide it, right?
All right.
If they don't, then we don't.
Yeah, it's interesting because when work from home first became a thing for us, we were supplying desks and chairs, computers, battery backup monitors. I mean, the whole like take an empty room, we filled it with stuff to get them going work from home. And then we're like, why are we sending people desks? Like that seems
Right.
like gross overkill. So now we do the computers and the monitors and all that kind of stuff. That's more, I guess, partially said everyone's, I guess, with our crew, our company specifically, said everyone's on the same platform, I guess. So if somebody says, hey, I got a problem with my computer, my monitor, it's very easy because we know everybody's got the same stuff. So you can take care of it. But I guess that's fair. I mean, different businesses, different things, whatever. I get that. Tell me a story about hiring a programmer. Because programming to me just seems like I can't, like I'm more of a mechanical guy. I used to be a mechanic way back when. If I can touch it and if I can see it, you can figure out this gear's missing, whatever. I got that. Programming to me, I just cannot wrap my head around it. So I wouldn't even know where to begin hiring a programmer where you are. You know what I mean? Because you're like, hey, we need someone that knows Cobalt. I don't know if they still use Cobalt, but let's just say. And you're like, hey, do you know Cobalt? And they're like, I totally know Cobalt. Do you know it pretty good? Or do you kind of know it? Or like, how do you judge whether they're a good programmer or not?
Yeah. You asked a few minutes ago about do we take on projects, and part of the reason why we don't take on projects is because our clients typically have a certain infrastructure or certain personnel in their company to be able to manage these projects. So to I say this as a way to answer your question in that if you were going to hire a programmer, I would imagine that you would at least first hire a senior developer, right? Someone that is going to be in charge of the other programmers, whether domestically here in the US or in the LATAM region. And that person would be the person to test everyone else. So we do vetting, we do we can use testing platforms, but today with artificial intelligence, there are even ways to sort of cheat
Oh,
the system on those testing platforms. So what we recommend is first let's make sure that your tech lead that you're good with your tech lead. By the way, if you want to hire a tech lead in region, that's fine too. But then we have to be sticklers for that first person to make sure that that person does have the skills, everything they say. Have the person do a project, have the person do an in-person project, whatever is necessary. And then it would be that person, again, whether your tech lead is in the US or in region, that person is then tasked with hiring the rest of them and then making sure that the rest of the people have the knowledge, right? So it's almost, James, as if you're because of your expertise, if you were to ask a chief technology officer to start hiring call answering people or operators, they would know how to start, but you do. So, if roles were reversed, you would expect that person to hire their lead, and then it's the lead that hires the rest of the team.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. So they know what to look for. Because I'm sure a person could show me a pile of code, and I'd just be like, "Okay, it looks good."
Correct. That you think it's COBOL and it's gobbledygook, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. I have no idea.
yeah.
Tell me, you alluded to it a little bit, so I want to ask from a perfect segue point of view. How is AI helping or hindering your business?
I think it's a little early to tell still. So hindering a lot of the jobs that can be done remotely are now, and I'll say there are claims that they can be done through AI. Um,
Perfectly said. The claim is there, but yeah,
yeah, I haven't seen it all, and certainly there's a level of quality. I don't know what your experience is like, James, but I use AI all the time, and my perception of it is it's incredible. But it also still requires a lot of hand holding and a lot of coaxing, a lot of coaching. Um, so assuming that you know it's going to be able to take over customer support roles. If it was chat, it's easier, and then you have someone next to, well, not next to it physically, but sort of on call to take the exceptions. But that still requires some level of human interaction. So yeah, the first part of it is there's a potential hindrance because theoretically not the same amount of people aren't going to be hired remotely, which is also true domestically, by the way, right? Um, because AI is going to take over a whole lot of jobs. It's not there yet, and because of that, I'm not exactly sure whether it's hindering to the point that other people are talking about or less. I'll even tell you a quick story, and I won't mention the company name um, for that protection, but we we had a bunch of people working for a client, and then um, they came back and said, "Look, we're going to get rid of all this staff because we now have our AI agents, and we're going to go humanless, full AI." We said, "All right, I mean, you're the client, and our agreements are month to month, so." You get to make the decision. So they did. They let go all of them, and then we started trying to help these people find new jobs, right? We try to be, you know, human or humane to everyone, and whenever we can, whether it's with us or through someone else, try to help them. And when we were in the process, about 6 weeks later, we got a call from the same company saying, do you know if those people are still available? Because we need to hire a bunch of them back. And I wasn't poo-pooing them or anything, but I said, why? What happened? He says, well, yeah, the solution just isn't where we thought it was going to be. So they didn't hire 100% of them back, but they did hire about 60% of them back. So that's a very long way of saying there's a hindrance, at least in this use case, of 40% of the jobs that are there, but it's not 100. So everywhere from 0 to 100, different use cases are going to have different levels. That's sort of one end. And then how is it helping? You also have a whole set of use cases that can now be performed remotely by people that previously you weren't going to be able to, whether it's through agents that are able to farm out more granular tasks to people in the region that previously couldn't be done. So there's hindrance, there's some help. For us, our business is growing, so whether the growth is hiding some of that reality, I think some of it is there, um, but certainly humankind is going to undergo a revolution, right? I mean, we're in the throes of it, and what's going to happen? This isn't about my job or my company. This is about humanity. What's going to happen to humanity? It's a
fair.
little the question is deeper than than the one you're asking.
Totally fair. Yeah, I think you and I have the same experience that way and same perspective. We're kind of tiptoeing, saying like, how far do we want to open this little genie bottle up here?
Yeah.
And yeah, the promises or I guess the marketing, from my point of view, it's like you said, it's claiming way more and way more accurate than what's being delivered.
Well, for people that are selling it, they got to claim it. So
Yeah. So it's
yeah,
interesting because we offer AI answering for clients, and I think half my sales pitch is saying this is not a direct replacement for a human. This is more a replacement for your voicemail.
correct.
Like it can do things and it can do a little song and dance, but it's not 100%. And there's no guarantee that it's going to be 100% accurate. And like you said, the coaching, I mean, we have hours invested in coaching the platform that we use to get email addresses that people speak correct. Just when you say something like Gmails and Gmail, it would take the email as G as in G, M as in, and have this 500 million letter email address. Like, no.
Yeah. There's so many failures and so many successes that we could just do a whole podcast on these things. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right? Right. Fair.
to what you were saying is I'm glad that you have the ethics to tell people that if only people listen to them, because they sometimes think that you're telling them that because you're looking to have people there and make more money, but it's not there. Will it get there? Potentially, right?
Yeah.
Probably, but it's not
It's
quite there yet.
it's interesting. It's always one of those things where the last mile is the hardest. And this, like, we're 95% of the way there. But that 5% is going to take 100 times more computing power and, just all these things that are needed. So it's good.
Yep.
And
So
there's, yeah,
that reminds me, and I don't know the exact number. So you and your listeners will excuse it if I sort of screw it up. But I remember a story where for the mapping of the DNA genome, right? It was sort of they had set this goal of doing it in X amount of time, and then after 50% of that time had elapsed, they were only done with a small sliver, 2 or 3%, and then 80% of the time, 80% of the time had elapsed, and they were still only at like 10 or 15% of the goal there, and people were thinking, "Gee, we're never going to make it." And then, ultimately, the it got to the point where with a little bit of time remaining, there was so much progress made because they were sort of building on top of each other. Successes were being stacked on top of each other, on top of each other. And ultimately, did they get there? I believe they got there within a reasonable time frame of the goal that had been established, even though for the majority of the time, it looked as if it was never going to get there. So, once you sort of solve the big problems, then potentially these things will get solved. But we have yet to see them happen. So,
fair,
we're going to witness it. I hope.
time will tell. It's an interesting time to be alive. I
But
don't know if they'll call it Web 3.0 or what,
well,
or
all
whatever,
times are
but
interesting. I mean, James, the only perspective we have is our current perspective, right? So,
right.
so I mean, think about medieval times, right? And the printing press, and all of a sudden, those were super interesting times. Or back when, the Henry Ford and the automobiles, those were interesting times. So, I think that there's a Chinese curse, right? May you live in interesting times.
Fair. Totally fair. I remember my little brother had a history project, and he had to pick a decade. And I remember going through, man, I had this magazine. I want to say it was mental health. The name of the magazine is going to escape me. But anyways, it did decades from like 1800 every 10 years. and showed off the inventions and discoveries over the course of these 10-year periods. And it was kind of eye-opening, just to your point, that every decade, phenomenal things happen, incredible things that you just kind of take for granted, like that was in the past, whatever. So even now, I'm reading Alexander Hamilton's biography, and it's interesting because some of the arguments that the author is talking about in that Congress, like we're still having these same conversations that they were having 200, 250 years ago.
Well, look, we can make as much technological or physical progress, but philosophical or political, that I'm not sure about, my friend.
True story. We're stuck. We're stuck in center.
We kind of are.
Yeah, it's so funny.
It was it Benjamin Franklin, no, Winston Churchill, right? That said, democracy isn't the answer, to all our ills, but it's the best solution we found so far. Or capitalism, I believe. No,
Yeah.
it was capitalism, not democracy. Right?
Yep.
So until we come up with a better one, then I think we're going to have we're going to keep having these discussions.
It's the great experiment, right?
It is, and God bless America, because it's sort of leading that experiment and doing it correctly, showing the world how it should be done. Whether people believe in it or not, it's to me, that's besides the point. It's proven its worth and its value millions of times over, especially if you view it from the viewpoint of a lot of people that work for us in region. A lot of people seem to think that the shine off Lady Liberty's crown, and the glimmer of hope have gone away. And I got news for you and your listeners. As bad as you think it is, it's just because you're used to the good life.
Oh, we have a sweet, incredible life here. When I visited Europe a couple times last year, and there were little things, I guess for the most part, it seemed like just the U.S., right? It seemed very similar, but there were certain things like the size of the roads, the parking, the age of the buildings. Even though they're majestic and beautiful, everything is ancient. So in order for it to evolve and have light switches, as an example, you had to have not open conduit, but you had to have conduit. It wasn't hidden behind the wall and stuff like that. There's just little things like that you take for granted. Or Puerto Rico, when I was there, the volume of wires that they just had hanging out in the sky, right? The telephone wires or power wires. I mean, it was crazy. We ended up meeting a guy. So Buddy and I were traveling there. We meet this guy in a cafe, and this was probably 2 or 3 years after, I want to say one of their biggest hurricanes. The name of the hurricane is escaping me though. But the guy was saying that they don't replace, they just add. So anytime a wire breaks or something like that, you don't diagnose it, you just add another wire. And so they had, because I'm like, there's no way all those things are running power. But it was a mess. But
yes, and I can tell you millions of stories like that. So yes, again.
Yeah. On the flip side, I was on the train heading to Chicago, and a certain part of the L train there, I'm like, what are we in Puerto Rico? There's a lot of wires here. What's going on? So, anyways, yeah, it's a good day to be alive, I guess, as far as that goes. And
agreed.
Problems have always existed, and they will continue to exist. The very moment that we don't have any problems, we'll probably create some just to keep ourselves entertained, right?
Yes. And look, and the reason why we're alive is because there are problems to be solved, and it's about continuous improvement. And the reason why we have companies and businesses is because there are problems that we can solve that we're better at solving than others, and we can specialize in these things. So yeah, that's where we are. God bless.
True. Yeah, indeed. Louis, I meant to ask you about your other businesses, because when I was doing some research on you, you've had all kinds of startups. So I know we're pretty shy on time here, so just tell me really briefly about the other startups and your book.
So the I've been an entrepreneur, as I said, ever since I was 7, selling candy in my elementary school. Uh, I had an import-export company that where my father was my business partner. We imported goods from Asia and then sold them to the domestic market. Super interesting. Um, Even more interesting working with family business and working with your father and mother. It's
I bet.
it was quite the experience, and I was 19 at the time, so it was interesting. Um, I had a direct sales company where we sold housewares directly to consumers, giving them consumer credit. Um, Took that to uh, millions of dollars in sales, about 35,000 people reselling our wares. So another interesting company. Then my the tech startup that we've spoken about. Now I do staffing. Uh, I've been an investor in different types of companies. Uh, so once you're bitten or bit by the bug, by the entrepreneurial bug, and I'm sure you can empathize with the statement, James. You sort of see opportunities and problems rather than seeing problems for what they are. You start to see opportunities, and because of that, we tend to start companies instead of just fixing problems. Uh, so that's sort of my entrepreneurial journey, and I've been incredibly fortunate to have had success, some failures, but uh, as long as at the end of the game, you're ahead by at least a run, then you won, right? I mean,
You're good. Then
that's
you're
what the
good.
game is about. And then to the book. So I'm publishing a book uh, about the Offshore Team Death Trap, and it's and the remote intelligence solution. And I'm doing this, James, because everything that we've spoken about, as much as you were surprised by it and I wasn't, I realized that most people are going to be surprised by the types of problems that exist and by the types of solutions that can be uh, presented. And again, my business is profitable and we make good money, but there are so many problems that we won't be able to solve, um, that we want people to understand the framework and to be successful if they decide to do it on their own. So it's a guide about how to achieve offshore or nearshore success based on my experience. Uh, and the title is the Offshore Team Death Trap: Stop the Cycle of Failed Projects and Wasted Resources, which we've modified recently, and it'll be published mid-July. The exact date I don't know. It'll be available on Amazon and and the audiobook and whatnot. And we're extremely proud of it because if we can help people solve this problem, then what we will do is create win-win solutions where more people will be able to work remotely and more people will be able to create jobs remotely, and that is what our job is about. Now, for those people that don't want to do it themselves, we also, we offer the service and free assessments and whatnot to help them do it. But the purpose of the book is to help them do a do-it-yourself solution rather than having to rely on us or another company like us.
Gotcha. I love it. And this is a book written by you, is that right?
It is. It is.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Tell me, Louis, a website where people can find you.
So my company's called Near-Yu, and it's the phonetic spelling. So it's N as in Nancy, I as in India, R as in Robert, dash Y as in Yankee, U.com. Near-You.com. Me, I can be found on LinkedIn, Louis Derechin, LuisDerechin. Hit me up on LinkedIn, DM me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect, catch up. If I can help in any way, I'd be more than happy and proud to do so.
Sweet. Louis, I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
It is me who thanks you. This has been most entertaining, and very personable. So thank you for making it easy on me.
Yeah, we covered some ground here. Hiring, that's always a fun topic for business owners because you always imagine, or at least I imagine when I started my business, this is going to be great. You'll get employees, you'll pay them, they do the job, rinse, repeat. And it's not quite that easy all the time.
I'll leave you and your listeners with one last funny story. I had a guy that worked for me uh, in a previous company. He was a CTO, and he, whenever there were any problems, all he would say, "It's Lewis, it's the people." Right?
Oh, you could define that so many ways.
Right? Well, that's a point. That's
Oh,
sort
I
of what
love
you
it.
were saying, right?
That's genius. That's genius.
Yep.
I love it. That's the guy that you used to work for, you said?
Yes.
All right. That's funny. I love it. This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. My name is James Kateman, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur in all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. If you're listening or watching this on the web and you enjoyed what we had to say, if you don't mind, give it the big old thumbs up, subscribe, and of course, share it with your entrepreneurial friends, especially those that need to add some people, which presumably it's most businesses. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Louis Direction of Near-Yu. And Louis, can you tell us that website one more time?
Near-Yu, NIR-YU.com.
Easy enough. I love it. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawincustomers.com. Thank you for joining us. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.